Welcome to the Indie Writer Podcast, where we talk about all things writing and indie publishing. Today, I'm excited to talk about capturing the middle grade voice with Rod Martinez. Attracted to words at an early age, Rod's first book was created in grade school. His teacher used it to encourage creativity in her students. His high school English teacher told him to try short story writing. He listened, and the rest, as they say, is history. Welcome, Rod. I'm so excited to chat with you this evening.
Hey, thanks for having me. This is going to be great.
Yeah, so I want to give a brief intro. I met Rod at the Colorado Writing Conference, and he spoke a lot about his inspiration for some of his middle grade novels. And I just thought, what a fun topic to share with our listeners. So we're going to chat about that a little bit today. So to kick us off, Rod, could you just kind of give an overview of your work and what drew you to middle grade writing?
Sure, but before I do that, I got to go back to what you were just talking about. So you probably don't know this, but I'm the one that prompted everyone in Colorado, hey, why don't we go to this dinner? And then I did that thinking, I'm going to win this thing. And guess who won, folks? Jacqui won. There were tons of people in there trying to figure out this mystery in a mystery theater, and Jacqui won. So I was like, well, at least one of us got the prize. So thank you for taking.
Well, that's what happened. So we were in this conference, and there was a murder mystery dinner happening at the same conference, not associated with the conference, but it was at the same hotel. And I guess that's what happens when you throw a murder mystery at a hotel that has a conference for writers that weekend. So we all go and crash it. That was a lot of fun.
So, my origin and all this, I grew up. I speak a lot at schools. I talk to schools, kids of all ages. And one of the first things I always talk about is the origin, because the first question the kid will ask you is, what got you started? What got you into writing? And I grew up reading comic books, and I was just slain in Marvel and DC comics growing up. And I just kept thinking, I'm going to work for Stan Lee when I grow up. That's what I'm going to do. That's going to be my life. I can't wait. And of course, you grow up and do other things. But when I was in high school, I started writing, of all things, I started writing horror, occult type, really dark stuff, just because I was into that kind of stuff on TV and the movies. But it wasn't until I became a dad, and my son, who was in 6th grade, challenged me after watching The Goonies. Hey, you should write a story like that about me and my friends. And I'm like, okay, boy, you're on. You got a challenge here. Okay. So I figured, I'll make a quick little 20-page adventure with these 4 kids. And that happened, and it was good. And he read it. His friends read it. The school, some of the teachers and the parents read it. And they kept telling me to push it, keep going. And I kept thinking, this is just for fun. I don't want to write middle grade stuff. This isn't my thing. But they kept pushing me, and okay, fine. So next thing I knew, I have a complete novel. And I'm like, what do I do with a novel? And the school librarian's like, you got to get it published. Go find a publisher, get this thing published. I want this in my library, and that's what got me started. I had no idea that I'd be doing this. My son, I blame my son for everything. So,
well, that's what they're good for, right? I have a 12-year-old right now, and he's a big inspiration. I haven't tried middle grade, but my most recent novel has a kid about his age. So I'm just happy to talk about this, even in an adult book, writing teenagers or preteens, with a voice that suits them. I think that's a really broad topic, even if you don't specifically write middle grade. Tell me a little bit how you start writing a middle grade book. It's obviously going to be a little different than your adult stories you've been writing. How do you get into the head of a middle grader?
I get that question a lot, and my best answer is I cheated. Most people I know decide I'm writing stuff. I feel like writing, I'm going to write a middle grade book now. And you just start writing, and you think most adults write thinking as an adult and trying to make a kid's voice come out. They tell you all the time, don't preach to kids, don't talk down to kids. You have to sound like a kid. And I wasn't writing that kind of stuff. The beauty for me was the book that I wrote, The Juniors. Those 4 kids are real. They're real in my life. I knew them. I hung out with them. I was the parent that I was like the president of the band association in school. He was in band. I went on all the field trips with them. The kids hung out with us. We went to our house, we went to their house, we went to the beach together. I live in Florida. We went to the beach, we went to Orlando. We did all the fun stuff. And the whole time I'm hanging out with these kids, and they have no idea that I'm studying them. So I was saying this when we were in the conference. I'm sitting in the car. I'm like, hey guys, let's go to so and so. Let's go to the beach. Okay, so they're in the car on the beach, and we're just driving, and you just listen to them, listen to the conversations of the kids when they're talking. Can you believe what Amy did with her hair? OMG, And I'm like, oh man, that's good. That's. And all the little things that they would say, the vernacular, the comments, just the exclamations, the way they talked, the way they acted. I had each one of those kids' characters down and wrote the story around them. And in fact, to tell you another story, I don't share this a lot. When I finished writing the whole manuscript, there were two friends of theirs that I knew loved to read. And I said, hey, would you guys mind reading this? Let me know what you think. And one of them, she was 12 years old, just like the other. She came back and she said, this isn't going to work. What do you mean this isn't going to work? She says, well, the four of them in your story, they all get along. They're all laughing all the time. They aren't like that in real life in school. They're always screaming at each other and one wants to be the boss. And I was like, hey, you're right. Let me rewrite that thing. So I rewrote it and gave it back to her. She goes, yeah, this is more like it. I had a 12-year-old editor tell me how to write a book.
Oh, I love that so much. That was actually one of the questions I was going to ask you, is if you ran it by any kids in those early days.
I did that.
I love that.
It just worked. And now I just have friends with kids. So I'll say, hey, would you mind letting Junior read this? What do see what he thinks? And that helps, when you can get the voice of a kid. It's really hard to get that. I don't know how to explain how to do it. To me, like I said, I cheated because my first book, I was hanging around with the kids that were in the book. So I knew how to make them work. And after that, every other book that I wrote, I just kept that in my head and kept writing it. And it just works. A lot of people tell me I talk like a kid too much. So I just go.
You wrote this first book, with these initial kids in mind. What did your son think? Did he ever get directly quoted in your book, or did he just kind of get a kick out of all of that? Was there anything that you wrote that he's like, oh, I wish you wouldn't put that in there, Dad?
I put a lot of stuff in there that probably all four of them didn't want in there, but I didn't use their real names, but everyone knew who they were. It got to the point in school they were being called the juniors. Oh. The book. So they just kind of, they became a clique, and it was just cool. I mean, I love that. You can create a story and kind of make a life out of it, because the juniors kind of became my life for a while with them. And that's what prompted me into talking at schools and stuff. And that opened the whole everything. It opened the doors for everything. So
yeah,
I'm grateful. It was awesome.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And so what did it look like kind of when you switched to writing different characters that weren't based on kids in real life? Did you just kind of take part of those personality traits and move them over, or did you kind of write entirely new characters?
Yeah, I wrote totally new characters in other books, but I almost always, I was going to wear my Scooby-Doo shirt, but I wore my shirt instead, because I grew up on Scooby-Doo, and that was like, I based the juniors off Scooby-Doo and the Goonies. That was my thing there. So it's always about a group of kids. Stephen King said it in his book on writing. The best thing to do is to put a character in a situation and let them alone and let them figure it out, how to get out of there, how to get out of it. And that's what I do every time with whatever group of kids. It's always something, even like these are just regular kids, but I have other books where kids have special powers or something, or this one kid is a leader of a group and he has this weird power of going back in time, or all that kind of thing. And it's just stuff that if I was a kid that age, this is what I want to read. And that's how I write. I want to read this kind of stuff.
And do all of your books kind of take place in the time period in which you're writing them? And has that changed how you write kids over the years? Because you said now your son is 25, and so you've been writing middle grade for 13 years, it sounds like. So has your writing changed based on how kids have changed, or how their dialogue has changed, or anything like that?
It has. I mean, I have to add new things. Like, I'm totally a dweeb on everything like Twitter and all that stuff, but you have to add it in the stories, all that stuff. The kids are using it, so you have to learn so you can put it in there. But I also write young adults, so when he turned into a teenager, I was like, well, I'm just going to write another story with him and his new friends in high school, and that'll be another book that got published. So it's just a matter of following the kids. But I can't see myself moving from anything else except middle grade and young adult because it's too much fun. It's just fun writing this stuff.
And so where do you start? You just said that you kind of put your characters in situations and let them figure it out. But like, what is your first, with your process, where do you start first? Do you have a plot in mind or a setting in mind? Obviously, this one was based on these specific kids, but how about some of your other stories? Like, what does your process look like?
So I moderate author panels a lot. And the biggest fight that we have is pantser versus plotter. And I'm a serious pantser.
Me
I can't
too.
plot. I can't plot at all. So like the juniors, I was like, okay, four kids from Tampa, Florida, find an SD card in a cafe while on vacation in Georgia, and some bad guys are after it. That was it.
Okay.
And that became a whole novel. So other stories, I come up. It isn't a plot. I just come up. You probably do this since you're a pantser. You have a pretty basic idea of what you want to do, and then you kind of. With me, it's been weird because a friend of mine asked me, how do you write like that? And I said, well, I have a basic idea. I sit down, blank page on Word, and start writing. She goes, start writing what? I said, I just start writing. It just starts. And then the characters take over. You just kind of sit back. I tell the kids all the time, I feel like I'm in an auditorium and I'm watching a play and I'm just writing everything that's going on. That's how it feels. And some people just look at me like, you're from another planet. No one writes like that. I'm like, tons of people write like that. But, other people just don't get that. And really good friend of mine, Maria DeVivo, she will probably listen to this and cringe, but she and I have a big fight on this all the time. It isn't a fight, but, whenever we're together, that's the big thing, Okay, put the wall here, don't touch me. So, but yeah, to me, it's just about getting a basic idea. And there's a book that's coming out that's actually with a publisher right now called The Spectre Trail. And it was about, if you can imagine this, I thought, so what if this girl lives out of town? All my stories take place in Florida because I live here. She comes from out of town every summer for the first 2 weeks of summer, stays with her grandmother in Florida in this old house that's supposedly haunted, but she's never seen anything all the time she's been there. She's 12 years old. She's never seen anything. And her friend next door is always telling her, there's a ghost in your house. No, there isn't. Well, you know what? I just found an app called Apparition, and it will show you that there is a ghost in that house. And the app shows them, and then there's a whole story about how do we get this ghost out of the house. That isn't copywritten yet, but Apparition, that's mine. No one take that, okay? I made.
Yeah, I'd enjoy that one. Congrats that that's with a publisher right now. That's wonderful.
Yeah, they loved it. It's a Florida publisher. She says, we love this. We want to take it, please. Let's go with it. So
Yeah, that's great. Do you have a timeline for that one?
I don't. It's just finished the first phase of editing,
Okay.
so it's back at the editors now, and see. I don't
Know how that goes. Yeah, I tend to with my pantsing. I've tried many times, especially the last 2 years, just to find a middle ground. I'm like, I'd like to be a little better at outlining, just so I don't write myself into corners as much. And then I've just found anytime that I put those constraints on myself, I just don't write, or I don't write the way that I'm built to write. And so I think it's okay to just go with it.
Yeah, when I try to explain it to people, I'll tell them, to me, it's almost like working with a jigsaw puzzle. You're doing the pieces and it's just going and going and going. And you get to the end, it's like, wait, that isn't the right piece. Wait, let me move this.
Mm-hmm.
And by the end, the story just kind of worked. To me, the story just works itself out. It just, every time I write the end, I'm amazed. I was like, wow, I just finished. I did this. And I did not plan it. It just happens. I don't know.
Yeah. I think we have so many stories ingrained in us, just from being absorbers of stories our entire lives, that some of that kind of clicks in his muscle memory more than we realize. But I'll definitely see that and be like, oh, it's a perfect ending, and I don't know how I got there.
Actually, I do that, then I'll come up with another ending and say, oh, should I do this ending instead? And that's another fight.
Mm-hmm. We just did an episode, it airs tomorrow, about choose your own adventure stories. So you should give that a shot. That was really fascinating.
Yeah, when it comes to, because you were asking me about voice, and I had a story, and I won't say his name because I don't know if you'll ever listen to this, but I had a friend who was writing once, and I was in a critique group, and we're all sitting listening to our stories, and we read his stories. We would all give in like 12 pages, We were at the store, and it's like, this whole thing about a submarine, and these people are on the submarine, and they have to go down and save something, and there's this big creature and all this kind of thing, right? And we finished it, and we all gave our critiques. And he was kind of perplexed, and he says, "You guys, none of you guys got it." And we're like, "What?" He says, "They're all in the sixth grade." And we're like, "Dude, this sounds like these are adults, man. Where do you did you even mention the school? Because it wasn't mentioned, but he knew when he was writing it, these are kids." And then, afterwards he was kind of discouraged, but he pulled me aside and says, "Hey, can we talk? How do you get that kid voice thing going?" And I couldn't explain it, and I felt so hurt because I loved the story, but I think he quit it because he wanted it to be a kid story, and it didn't have that voice. And he's moved away since, but I really wanted to help him with that one because that was a good, and I don't know how to tell people how to do that. I mean, I know this is what we're talking about now, the whole thing, and I'm supposed to give you this magic potion. Everybody do this, stand on your leg 3 times and tap your foot, and there you go, boom, but there's no magic to this. It's to me, like I said, to me, it was being around kids. And I have told people this, to not be creepy about it, but hang around kids, go to the library or, volunteer at a school or something. And just because we're writers, we people watch. That's what we do. We sit at Starbucks and we're just watching everything going on. Ooh, that's a good one. Just writing down ideas. Every day a new idea hits me, and I'm just like, I have too many ideas on the backlog to get started with something. But to get true kids' voice, you have to listen to kids and watch them. Is the only way to do it.
Yeah, and that's interesting. So hearing about your friend that was writing, and you say that it just kind of comes to you, but then you also talked about having a 12-year-old kind of beta reader, and so those are things that our audience can look out for. Does most of your kid voice come through dialogue, or do you have kind of an internal monologue going?
It's both as an internal monologue, but I'm a very strong dialogue person because that's what, kids are like Harry Potter. There's a lot of action going on. They're going back and forth talking, and that's what gets the reader involved in the stories. Like, you feel like I'm there with you, I tell the kids all the time, like, how many of you have read Harry Potter? Hands go up. How many of you have seen the movie? How many have been to Universal Studios and seen it? Okay, so all this came out of the brain of one lady. And when you're watching a movie or something, you feel like you're sitting right there with them, don't you? It's like, all about Hogwarts and everything else. You know everything about this place because this lady brought you into her world. And she did it in your voice, so.
Right. Well, we can talk about that a little bit more too, but I'm curious. This is a question Carrie, one of our other hosts, threw on here. She's a librarian, and she's one of the hosts as well. And she was curious, just how do you kind of balance, you're getting the dialogue right. How do you make sure that it's also at the right reading level? Was that something that took some practice during editing, or that you kind of worked with people to make sure that was right?
The voice part, like I said, it was easier the first time because of the kids, and I knew how they were, the vernacular and everything. Going back and editing, a lot of the times my son, whenever I finished reading one, I would read it to him, and he would stop me. Stop! No, you can't put that there. I'm like, but no, can't put that. So okay. So I would change it, and it's always good to have a judge in that age, but not everyone has that. And I was lucky to have that. But I think writing it, as long as I've been doing it, it just kind of comes natural now. And I am that person that will go to a bookstore or to the library, because I'm at the library all the time. I go to the library and you're just sitting there and you're just listening to kids talking with their parents, and you just catch it. And to me, it's really a part of just being a part of the group that you're trying to write for, to listen who they are, how they are. And that's just really important. You can't fake it. I mean,
Yeah, for sure. And, so many 12-year-olds are so different. Like, I know many 12-year-olds in my son's circle who really just kind of converse like little adults. And then others who have, much more kind of that tween energy in their dialogue. And so that's kind of interesting.
I tend to write more between. So.
Yeah. So do you have favorite middle grade books that you like to read or that were an inspiration to you?
I hate that question.
I'm sorry.
No, I don't, because I don't really have enough time to read as much as I used to. And when I am reading, I'm usually reading nonfiction. So I love biographies. So I'm usually reading biographies and stuff. So I don't really. So what I do get a chance to do is like go in the library and pick up a kid's book and just kind of skim through it, and then okay, put it down, walk away and something. And I just kind of keep some of that stuff or write notes of something that I've seen or heard. But I haven't really had time to really just read a good middle grade book in a while. So I can't say I have a favorite.
So tell me a little bit about the difference for you between writing middle grade and YA.
Middle grade to me is more, I don't want to say childish, but to me it's just more innocent. I write in this day and time now, the way books are being written, we're more aware of the social aspect of what's going on, and I write more to entertain. I write books to just help you. I want a kid to read this and to just escape. Like, wow, this guy can go back into the past and the future. I want to read, instead of like what's going on today. This guy just got shot down the street. I don't want to write that kind of stuff. Everybody else is doing it. So I'd rather entertain the kids because that's what I like to do. When I'm speaking to kids, I'd rather hear them laughing than seeing them go, it's just a thing with me. I like making kids laugh. So then young adult, I just kind of get a little more serious, but it's more about, as you and I both know, growing up, you're a young adult, all the angst you have to deal with and being accepted and, do I fit in with this crowd? And, I'm the loner, I'm the one off or something. And I tend to concentrate more on those kind of characters in young adult.
And where do you draw the line between middle grade and young adult? I know that my son is kind of at that upper age of middle grade, but is already reading young adult.
Right.
Is it kind of more about coming of age moments, or where do you think that line is drawn with your characters?
It's normally it's the age line, but a lot of times it's what the publisher editor says. I mean, the first book, the juniors that I wrote, the first publisher that looked at it loved it, except they said, we want to change the kids' ages to 14. And they were 12. I said, no. They said, no. We're publishers who know what we're talking about. I said, no, they have to stay 12. They're middle grade, but they sound like teenagers. They have to stay 12, and we fought about that. I was like, okay, never mind. No contract. I wasn't going to give that up. So, to me, it's almost like it's an age line because you get to that one point where 14, 15, and it's like, I'm not a kid anymore, and things are different now. And look, wow, she's cute. He's cute, and it's just a whole different world now. So young adult, I don't throw really romantic stuff in there, but it's more like, someone has a crush on someone or something, but then they have all this other drama going on in their world. And how do we get through this? So
right. Yeah. Well, Rod, I would love to invite you to read for us, and then we can chat a little bit more, once we've heard a excerpt.
Okay. I picked a little bit from the Spectre Trail, the new one that's coming out whenever it comes out. And I kind of told you guys a little about what's going on, but this happens like Mary Ellen is the girl. She's 12. She's from Cincinnati. She's just gotten into grandmother's house. And when she first gets there, she always feels like, 2 weeks here, I don't know if I got to that part yet in here. I hope I did because I don't want to miss it. No, it's there. Okay, good. So here we go. Mary Ellen pushed open the squeaky door of her bedroom, dropped both Harry Potter suitcases on the center rug, and sat on the plush mattress of her old Victorian canopy bed. Her trusty teddy bear Snookums sat up between her two pillows. It was as if he'd been waiting for her this whole year. Snookums, I've missed you. She grabbed the cream-colored stuffed animal in a quick hug and then reached over to set the antique alarm clock. It was one of those old manual ones with a bell on top. She faced it toward her side of the bed so that even with her glasses off, she could see the long hand and shorthand on the clock's face. Most kids her age didn't know how to tell time on a clock like this, but her grandmother had shown her when she was 7. She glared out the window at the house next door, Amy Gonzalez's house. It was almost the same design as her grandma's. She didn't like Amy, but every summer for at least 2 weeks, she would be the only other person here for Mary Ellen that she could talk with. Plus, Amy had a computer, a Microsoft Surface, and an iPhone. Peering through the window, she could see her lying on the bed, petting her cat and talking on the phone with a Surface on in front of her, her long dark hair covering her eyes. Jerk. It had been a long travel day, and Amy was tired, but without her phone or even her MP3 player, all she was able to do was read a book. The train ride was way longer than she cared for. They better send me back on a plane. That is, if Erie Creek even has an airport. Erie Creek, Florida was a small town in the Gulf of Mexico, just miles south of Clearwater, a town known for its beaches. Erie Creek didn't have a beach, though. The only body of water near was the creek that snaked its way through the small town. Her father had been born there, and many a story was told about his simple upbringing. Last summer, Amy told her that Mary Ellen's grandmother's house was haunted. That's what everyone said, she told her. Mary Ellen didn't believe her. She never believed her because Amy always made stuff up. Like the time she said Prince was one of her dad's best friends in the 90s. Whatever. After a quick change into her PJs, Mary Ellen fell fast asleep. She woke to heavy banging on her bedroom door. Mary Ellen, honey, it's 8:15. Why'd you lock the door? Her grandma sounded upset. OMG! Mary Ellen hopped up out of the bed. She turned to the clock. It was blurry. My glasses! As soon as she slipped them on, she saw the alarm clock had been switched off and the clock was facing away from her. What? Then she glanced at the door. She knew that she hadn't locked the door last night, but the latch was snug in place. So the part that I wanted to say wasn't in there is that her grandmother does not allow anything in her house. She doesn't allow cell phones, tablets, laptops. She has one television in her house with antenna. So she doesn't allow anything in her house. So of course she feels totally lost.
Wow. And I bet that's a feeling that most teenagers can relate to. To know what that would feel like. Well, thank you so much for sharing, Rod. It's nice to kind of get a taste of your writing style. Just talking more generally, have there been any resources or craft books or, story structures that you've enjoyed that have kind of just helped you, get your books to a place that you want them to be?
Wow, I don't have an answer for that one. No, because I just do the same thing over and over again, and it works. So I haven't tried anything new. I don't know. I had something I've written down here. I got a rejection letter once, and this kind of made me think of when you had asked me about doing this thing. It was one of my first rejection letters, and I forget what story it was. I sent it to a publisher, and they said, I wrote it down. I love your voice, but the story isn't something I'm interested in. And that was my rejection letter. I was like, what? Come on. What do you mean my voice? You don't even know what I sound like. I didn't know what she was talking about at the time. And then I brought it up to other writers, and they were like, oh, dude, you got something there. Just send her something else, And I was like, oh, man, I love your voice. What is that? And they kept saying, because you sound like a kid when you're writing it. You have that voice for kids. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. Compliment. All right. So I don't feel so bad after that. But I just kind of tell writers, I'm working on a presentation about this, thanks to Jacqui. And I found some stuff as I was doing research, and I forget what book it was, but it said, don't talk down to kids, don't preach to kids, speak to them on their level, and speak to them like, try to go back in time, remember what it was like when you were 12 years old. Go back to that time and write in that voice. And I read that and I thought, 12 years old, I remember 12. And I'm thinking about it, living home with mom and dad, my sister, my best friend next door, the grocery store around the corner. It's like, well, I could write a whole story about my childhood. Yeah. And it was just a whole different way of thinking about it. Just go back in time, visit yourself at 12, and write in that person's head. And that kind of blew my mind. I never thought of it that way.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that helps with so many different types of acting, types of writing, is that kind of just put yourself in your character's mindset. I've heard other middle grade writers say that they kind of imagine that they're, sitting around a campfire telling that story to kind of an audience of that age. Do you ever, record yourself talking or kind of just go through your stories out loud before you write them? Or is there any other tools that you use, when you're drafting?
I don't, but the tool that I'd use the most, and I think everyone knows how to do this, is Microsoft Word will read your story back to you, will read your manuscript back to you. And I do that a lot. I'll write and I'll stop and I'll let it read it back to me. Of course, the voice is really robot-y, but you get the gist of your story coming back to you, and it catches. Once you hear the story, because they say in editing, if you read the story back out loud, you will find so many mistakes you didn't see when you were reading. And to me, it's even better to have your computer read it back to you. and it reads it back to me, and I catch so much, and I'm like, okay, stop. Okay, I got to fix that, and that's a good way to go. I have not had the pleasure to have a like a child audience, except for when I go to schools and talk, and I'm already speaking from reading from one of my books. And I always tease them with the same book, and I stop this one partner, and I get the same thing. No, keep going. I said, no, now you have to buy the book. See, now mom and dad have to buy the books. That's so mean. You can't do that. Well, the library is going to buy one. Don't worry about it. Jeez, I got to keep talking here. So it's kind of a nice tease to do, but it's fun.
Well, that's a sweet reception.
Yeah. Well, when you get kids that want to keep hearing it, and then I get a letter back from the librarian a week later saying, these kids are still talking about your book. Now we have to order more. Thank you.
Yeah, that's awesome. What an honor. And what you were saying about just having, Microsoft Word read it back to you, I found that so valuable because I feel like, when you're looking at your own draft for so long, it's so hard to be objective about it and to just see it clearly. I know for me, I'll repeat something 3 paragraphs down and I just won't see it just reading it. I will quickly plug, I know I've done this on this podcast before, but I found this tool incredibly helpful. There's an app called Edit Out Loud. And basically what it does,
okay, I gotta write that down.
Yeah, it's great. So it takes your, Word file, you upload your Word file and it'll read it back to you. The voice is still kind of robotic, but then the nice thing about it is, it's got a really simple interface and you can just kind of hit insert comment on the app and then record a voice comment to yourself. So you can even do it while you're driving. And then it'll, when you're done, when you re-upload that document to your computer, all those little comments to yourself are track changes. But, it's all done through audio. And so I found that incredibly helpful if I just want to real quick push through the story on 1.25 speed or whatever and just make sure all the nuts and bolts are there. So that's my quick plug for that because I love that resource.
What are the other? I didn't answer your. I mean, I answered your question, but I forgot about this. I on TV, I have Roku, but on TV you can go to kids channels and just watch kids shows because I've done that too. I've listened to kids shows and you get all kinds of great ideas just listening to them go back and forth and stuff. Because there's certain words they don't use the word dweeb anymore, So you have to know what words are used. And
yeah, that's a really good point. And maybe for people that don't have a community of kids nearby all the time, that's a wonderful resource. And you probably get a little kind of okay, how are kids' stories paced these days, and what does that look like? Yeah, that's cool.
And another good one is and I know how weird it's going to sound, but if you went to a library and you had their calendar and knew when the next kid's story time is, and I've done this and said, I'm a writer, can I just sit in and just listen? And that works too. If you sit in and listen to a kid's time story in the library, it's like going to church. It's perfect. It's a learning experience.
Well, that's great because you're hearing the stories and you're hearing the kids' reactions to them.
No, I was going to say, I actually did for the first time. I did a couple months ago. I did a virtual school visit with first graders, and I've never done anything lower than fourth grade. And I thought, what am I going to do? This is going to be crazy. I don't know how to talk to first graders. I mean, what do you say to them? And I'm like, and I'm trying to come up with some kind of writing thing. And at the last minute, I just kind of winged it. And I'm on class on camera with them. And I see this whole bunch of faces just staring at me, So hi, Mr. Martinez, can you say Martinez? And it did. And after that, it just became magical. I was like, okay, I want to talk to first graders now because it was so much fun. So you kind of don't put yourself in a category. I never thought I'd do that. So I actually have a children's picture book now with a publisher also.
Oh, wonderful.
So, it actually was a publisher we met in Colorado. So
that's amazing. Congratulations. Yeah, and I know that I have a 12-year-old and 8-year-old, and she is my youngest is often reading middle grade books just because that's what my oldest is reading, so they'll read them together. And I think that depending on the kid, that it's not always going to fall along the age recommendations. Some younger kids will really enjoy those adventure stories, and And so it's good to not, I like what you say just about not talking down and not underestimating them. And I think we've talked about this before with librarians on this show, is just trust kids to know which books are for them and what stories are for them. And
Librarians are an asset to writers. They really are. I mean, they love books, they love reading, and you're the person that wrote it, so they're an asset to writers.
Yeah, library story times too, I would assume, are a good chance to do that. And then, yeah, for anyone listening who's done a middle grade book, kind of what Rod has done, where put yourself out there for school visits and kids give you honest reactions, right?
Yeah, my very first, and I can say this to anyone listening who's never been to a school. The very first time when the juniors was published, the local paper did a story on it, which kind of surprised me. And then teachers saw that, and that's how I started getting calls to go to schools. In the first school that called me to come, I thought, you want me to talk to kids? And I'm thinking, I'm a writer. I have stage fright. What are you talking about? And when I got there, I had all this stuff planned up. And she says, all you have to worry about is that these aren't adults. They're not the IRS. These are kids. They want you to be here because if you're here, they're not doing schoolwork. So talk as long as you want, make them laugh, have fun. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to make believe that this is my son in front of me. And that just became my thing. And it's fun. It's just fun.
I mean, kids are such a, honest audience too. If you weren't writing engaging stories, like you would know. Whereas if an adult is maybe reading at a library, that most adults are going to be polite and they're going to clap, but kids, you're going to get their very honest reaction when they think something's funny or they are bored.
Yeah, with them, when it comes to question and answers, that's my favorite part. So I'm like, I always get a question that I just totally didn't expect out of a kid, and just, you got to get creative. Like, so.
And so I know you said you like to keep things light with your middle grade books for the most part. And so how does that balance with also just, shooting straight with kids and not talking down? Like, where do you find that level of complexity that is right for the story?
To me, I think it depends on the storyline and on the characters, because I do have a couple of stories where maybe racial tension is in the story and it's serious and it's important. It's a part of the story. It has to be told. So, you have to be serious here, and the kids will know that reading it. But then, I have other kids, like the ones I was talking about now. The third friend, it was the two girls that I mentioned. The third friend is this kid that looks like a young Michael Jackson. And he's very confident in himself, and he thinks he's going to be the next mayor of town. So you have that kind of thing going on between the three friends and stuff. And that's the kind of thing kids know when they're in school. You have this one person who's really shy, this one person who's like, she's the most popular girl in school, and this other guy's the funniest guy in school, never wears the same shoes, or something like that. And I just like to play on those things that I remember growing up as a kid. And that my son would come back to me and tell me stories about, what happened at school today? No, son, tell me what happened at school today.
Yeah, I love that. So, keep it complex within their world, within the topics they're navigating on a daily basis.
I try to keep it fun and maybe spooky and stuff sometimes.
Nice. So. Yeah. Well, Rod, this has been a pleasure. I really enjoy talking to you. Before I let you go, can you just kind of let our audience know how to keep up with what you're doing, where to find you, and maybe, what to keep an eye out for next?
Sure. My webpage is rodmartinez.us, United States. Facebook, it's facebook.com/author Rod Martinez. And those are my two main ones. And everything I do is on there. I mean, like anytime I go speak somewhere or anything like that, and any latest book, well, the latest one isn't on there yet because we don't even have a cover yet, but that's where I try to keep everyone informed. And I love to be out preaching the word of literacy. I tell people that I love to preach the literary world to especially the kids, but anybody who wants to listen, because I grew up reading, and I'm sure I'm not the only one out there that just grew up from a kid just loving to have a book in his hand. So you can find me online, rodmartinez.us.
Awesome. And any librarians or teachers listening, give Rod a shout. So thank you. This is lovely. And we'll put links to your books and to your contact information in our show notes. So it's really easy for everyone to find. And thank you again. Thanks for listening to the Indie Writer Podcast. We hope you enjoyed this episode and will subscribe to hear our future episodes. We want to thank the Writing Block community for the continued support. You can find us on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook or at writingblock.com, no K. Remember to subscribe, share, and tell your friends. Thanks, everyone, and happy writing.